Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is all about my favorite bags and their worst qualities. I talk a lot about my favorite bags and how great they are, obviously because I like them, but I don't know about you guys, but when I'm making a really big purchasing decision, I want to know the bad stuff, you know? I want to know if there are any kind of functional issues, any wear and tear issues, or just any other niggles that I might find to be a deal breaker. So I have picked 6 of my most loved bags. Some of these are newer favorites, some of these are older favorites. I'm going to be discussing all the little flaws and niggles I have with the bags. Obviously, I still think that they're worth it, that's why they're my favorites, but you might consider these to be a deal breaker. So I hope you guys enjoy this and let's get started. So first up is my Chanel Jumbo, and many of you will know that I do consider this to be my all-time favorite bag. It was my favorite bag 5 years ago when I first started doing YouTube videos, and it's my favorite now. It's just been a very, very constant and steady favorite for me, but it is by no means perfect. So the kind of niggles I could really think of that I think would bother most people, the chains are squeaky, and this does lessen with time, and I do think it depends on the individual bag that you get. You do get variations with all Chanel bags, but a very, very common complaint I hear, and definitely something I've noticed with my Chanel Jumbos, is the chain can get really squeaky. So when you move and when you wear it, and most people I think wear it on their shoulder, it squeaks like a lot, and it's really, really weird. I don't know why it does it, and I think this is the only bag I've really noticed this on, but it's definitely very noticeable, especially with newer bags as well. This one is many, many years old now, but even so, I can still kind of hear it when I move. It doesn't bother me just because I've gotten quite used to it, but I've definitely heard people who have purchased new versions be like, what is that squeaking noise? And it really freaks them out. So that is definitely something to consider. Definitely a reason why I think if you are considering buy one, especially new from the store, try it on and make sure you're kind of comfortable, and you know, do just like a little bit of a walk down the store. I'm sure they won't mind if you tell them what you're doing, and just see if that noise bothers you, because it's definitely an unusual one and kind of unique to the Jumbo. The next commonly heard complaint I hear is the weight of the Jumbo, and it is a fairly substantial bag. You know, you do get quite a lot of bag for your money, but you also get a lot of leather and there's a lot of hardware as well, all of which combine to be not a particularly lightweight bag. So with the double flaps particularly, and with the single flaps which they produced many years ago, I do believe those are lighter. But these, you know, you have the double flap here, there is quite a lot of leather, and also the chains are very, very heavy as well. So all in all, it is definitely not a light bag. For me, I don't mind that because I used to carry my laptop and all my uni books on my shoulder. I'm very used to carrying a lot of weight on my shoulder, so it doesn't bother me in the slightest. But if you're not used to that and weight on your shoulder does bother you, that definitely might be a deal breaker for you in this bag. Next up is the size, and for me the size is an absolute bonus. You know, I love the fact that it is a fairly roomy bag, but I do also very much think that there should be an in-between size between the Jumbo and the medium. And I was kind of showing my mum the medium size, and she was like, oh, is this the really small one? I was like, actually, this is the next size down from my Jumbo. And she's like, what? That's so strange. I was like, I know, like there needs to be an in-between size, because the medium is lovely, but it's not the largest of bags, whereas the Jumbo is quite a large style, and it does feel like there should be something in between, either because of your height and you don't feel like the proportions are quite right, or otherwise for a more seamless day-to-night bag. I think the medium style is great for day if you can really pare back your essentials. Otherwise, it makes for a very, very nice evening bag. This one is great for day, but sometimes it can feel a little bit too large for a totally seamless evening style. So for me, I do feel like this is maybe a smidge big to be a truly versatile bag. I really think that you could do something in between the two. And then finally, my last worst quality of this bag is the price. And I didn't want to include price for all of these. You know, these are all luxury bags, so you could definitely include price in all of them, but I specifically wanted to with this bag because it is the most money of all my favorites, but of all the bags I have in my collection in general as well. And I do think it affects the ownership experience in a negative way, at least for me. And everyone is going to be different and have different pain points when it comes to this sort of thing. But not only does the price point now make it so much harder to buy, you know, it is an extortionate amount of money now, but for me, I'm always just very, very aware when I take these bags out of how much money is on my shoulder. And that doesn't kind of, I mean, maybe it should kind of fill me with joy, but it worries me more than anything, you know? It is nerve-wracking, potentially getting stolen, getting damaged. And, you know, I have a few Chanel bags now and they're all fully insured and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't stop me from not fully being able to enjoy my bags when I know how much money they cost and how much money they would cost to replace as well. I always get asked, you know, why do you still buy Tory Burch bags? Why do you still like those when you have Chanel? And for me, there's something very freeing about having a bag which is still beautiful and very well made, you know, it's lovely quality and still what I consider to be very luxurious, and not being totally terrified to use it and it being damaged, because yes, it still costs a lot of money, but it's not costing thousands and thousands. And that is something that I think you have to like mentally prepare yourself for when buying a Chanel bag, because, you know, yes, they're beautiful and they're very classic looking and all that kind of stuff, but I'm always just super aware of the cost whenever I wear them. So that for me would be something to keep in mind. Obviously everyone will be different. You might thrive off having this much money on your shoulder, but it's definitely something I think about. I do think it affects the ownership experience just because they do cost so much money now. Next up is my Neverfull, and I have a few Neverfulls now. I love them. They are another constant favorite for me. I think they are truly a fantastic style, and whenever people ask me for recommendations for a first bag, this is always one of the ones I recommend because I think it's wonderful and they've served me very, very well. That said, again, these are not flaw free, and so the flaws I can immediately think of that definitely bother me and that I wish could be improved upon. Number one is the lining, and it depends obviously what color lining you go for. These now come in a variety of different options. I always tend to go for the light colored linings just because that's what I like. But they do get really, really dirty, especially the pink one. The pink one is definitely the worst in my opinion, but oh my goodness, they mark. And you know, I'm not super careful with these bags. They are kind of everyday run around bags for me. But that said, I also don't abuse them, but even so, like, they just get very dirty and very grubby and they don't clean very easily either. I try to wash the marks off and they don't always come out, so that is definitely something to keep in mind if you are after one of these and you do want a light colour lining. They do get dirty. This will be mitigated somewhat if you go for a bag liner. I sometimes use a bag liner, but I don't always, so that is just something I've learned to live with, that these bags, if you go for a light colour lining, they will attract marks and stains, and that's just kind of a fact of this bag. Similarly, the vachetta as well does get dirty, and again, this will depend on what variation you go for. If you go for the damier ebene, that's not a problem. If you go for black trim, if you go for empreinte, you know, none of these will be issues, but if you do go for one with a vachetta trim, it does not only get darker, but it also gets dirty as well. Again, you can try and clean it. I've had limited success with that. It does also get darker, and I've had this one for, I want to say like 3 years now, maybe a bit more than that, and you can see it's definitely honeyed. For me, it's not a big deal, but I know some people like their bags to be perfect all the time, in which case this might bother you a little bit, so you might want to look at another option if you did like this style. So vachetta, I do think it's just one of those things, but that may grate on you if you do like your bags to be perfect. In terms of actual functionality, the two main things I can think of are, one, the straps are slightly on the thinner side, and so depending on your comfort levels and also how heavily you pack the bag, they could potentially dig in. As I mentioned, I have a pretty high tolerance for things on my shoulder, so again, it doesn't bother me. I do find that the leather softens up. The damier ebene is definitely a little bit stiffer, so again, it's going to depend on your tolerance for that. But if you are planning on really loading up your bag, that may be something to consider. I don't find them to be particularly unusually thin, but they are definitely a bit thinner than other styles I have, and they could potentially dig in and cause discomfort. And then the only other kind of functional flaw I can think of is the fact that it is an open tote, and I do think that's kind of part and parcel of having an open tote style. You do have a fastening right here, but to be honest, I don't think I've ever actually used it in terms of day-to-day life. I always just leave it open. That obviously does lead to kind of potential security issues, especially if you live in a city and if you're in kind of busy environments. That is something to keep in mind. There's not a whole ton of organization either. You can put things away in the zip pocket right there. You do also have the little pochette that comes with it as well, but there aren't a million pockets where you can store things in. It's pretty much, you know, your items are exposed with minimal fastening and security. So again, going to depend on your comfort level, where you live, what you use it for, but that is definitely something to keep in mind if you prefer kind of a Ziploc closure. And then the last kind of flaw I can think of in terms of this bag, and I'm not even sure whether I would consider it to be a flaw, but this is the most frequently cited reason I hear for why people don't like the Neverfull, and it is because of how common it is and that everyone seems to have one. And it's obviously not true. Not everyone has one of these styles. It's still a very, very luxurious and expensive bag, but I do understand that it is a more frequently seen style and that might not be everyone's cup of tea. Personally, it has never bothered me because I always think that if a bag is really popular, it's popular for a reason, you know, and I do think people like these because, you know, it's a very classic, beautiful style. It's very functional, very comfortable to wear, hard wearing, and it's overall just a pretty great style. So for me, I completely understand why people love them. It's why I love them, and it honestly doesn't bother me if every single woman on the street has one. But if you did want your bags to be a bit more unusual, not seen on everyone, then I can understand why this bag probably might not be for you. Next up is my Saint Laurent Loulou in the small size, and I really love this bag. I now have it in a few different colors and combinations. I think it's fantastic. That said, I do think there are just a few little design niggles that could be improved upon, which they don't bother me on balance, but I could absolutely understand how they would really bother other people. And so the biggest thing that I wish would be improved upon is the closure, because even though it's kind of a structured bag, it's not structured in the same way that the Chanel Jumbo is. You know, the Chanel Jumbo is like hard on the bottom, so when you knock it, you can actually like hear it. Whereas this one, it's squishy everywhere. So, you know, there's nothing really kind of overly rigid about the bag. So even though I wouldn't describe it as slouchy, it's certainly not overly structured and rigid. And because of that, when you open and close it, unless you have it completely full, it squishes. So you kind of close it, but to actually get it closed, you can see that you have to kind of properly squish it in, which I'm sure is fine if you do it once, but obviously people want to use these bags multiple times. And over time, I do think that could affect the wear and tear. I've not had any of mine, you know, years and years, and I do think this is the kind of problem that really only manifests itself after a long period of time. But I do wish that I didn't worry about that every time I closed it. I like the fact with my Chanel Jumbo, you can just close it, turn the turn lock. I don't feel like that affects the kind of structure of the bag at all. It always just remains the same. I think that's a big part of the reason why they wear so well, is because of how rigid and structured they are. Whereas I don't necessarily think that's the case here. And you do kind of have to squish them in order to get them closed. So I don't love that. Leading on from that, I would say that even though it has a magnetic closure, even though it does attract the button, it doesn't always completely seamlessly connect, and you do kind of have to move it around a little bit in order to get it completely closed. And I'm trying now, and again, it's not completely seamless. I feel like I'm gonna get it in a second. There we go. And I finally did it. But again, it's not as easy as a simple turn lock like you see on the Chanel styles. It's just a little bit trickier, and it's not a weak magnet, but it's also not super, super strong, and it's not a completely seamless close. So definitely something to keep in mind. Again, I don't mind it because I've kind of gotten a bit used to it, and I know I just have to fiddle a little bit more. But if you like your styles to be really easy breezy, you might not get along quite so well with this one. The other thing I wanted to mention was wrinkles in the leather, and this does seem to vary according to the bag that you get. And again, I don't know if it's individual bags or individual batches, but I have seen there is wrinkling that can appear on the leather. Now this is gonna, again, depend on your kind of preference and how much it bothers you. For me, I'm happy to accept that it's just a natural part of the leather. Sometimes it's going to be more obvious, sometimes it's going to be less obvious, but I also know that some people just don't want to see that at all on their bags. And so again, it's going to come down to how much you think that's going to bother you. It's not as bad on my nude one, but I do notice it a little bit more on my white one. I will try and pick it up on camera. I think it's the kind of thing that's a bit more visible in real life, but I will do my best. but that is something to keep in mind. For me, it's just a variation of the leather and the fact that this isn't, you know, a synthetic material, but something to consider when getting these. It is a smooth leather, it is going to show kind of wrinkles, and wrinkles do appear from time to time. And then finally for the Saint Laurent Loulou, I do think that the size could be a potential issue for some, and much like the Chanel flapline, I do think they could do with having an in-between size, in between the medium and the small. This one actually does fit in a surprising amount, but I also know that it might be too small for some people, certainly sometimes when I wear it, and less so in summer when I'm wearing lighter layers, but certainly in winter when I'm more likely to have kind of overcoats and scarves and layers and just bulkier clothing. I can sometimes feel like this looks a little bit small. So for me, I would love a size in between the small and the medium. Out of the sizes available, I would definitely say the small is my preference, but when it does come to winter wear, I do sometimes feel like this can look a little bit small and a little bit underwhelming in proportion to the rest of my outfit. Next up is my Mulberry Mini Alexa, and I think this is the newest bag on this list, but it's really become such a firm favorite for me ever since I got it late last year. It's just really beautiful and functional, and I've just really been enjoying it. And that said, and I have mentioned these kind of flaws or negative qualities a bit more recently. I did do a pros and cons video, but I will reiterate quickly here, and they are basically all around the closing functionality of the bag. So as I mentioned in that video, you can close it a couple of ways, or you have to close it a couple of ways, I should say. So you do have magnets right here, but you also have the turn lock as well. But because the bag isn't particularly structured, you do have to basically squish it in order to get it closed. So if you can see that, in order to close it, you kind of have to really press it down like so. And even then, the lock isn't completely easy in terms of it fitting through. So you kind of have to move it around, really squish it down, and then lock it, which unless you keep it completely full and padded out all the time, that does affect the structure of it. So I do kind of constantly worry that it's going to flatten the bag out. It probably doesn't help I keep demoing this, but definitely something to keep in mind. I wish that the lock was a bit easier. It doesn't seem to be completely seamless and easy to manage, especially considering it is, you know, a smaller crossbody. I often grab this when I do want to be hands-free, so I really just want to be able to close my bag, quickly close it, and then, you know, move on with what I'm doing. Whereas this one, it just takes a little bit of fiddling and just a little bit of maneuvering. You do also have the magnetic locks here, but I do find that I don't think that they're quite as strong as they could be, because they do often attract the kind of straps here, but it often means that they're a little bit wonky and they don't quite hit in the right place. And again, it just kind of requires a little bit of maneuvering in order to get them in exactly the right place, which I just don't always want to have to fuss around with my bag for 5 minutes every time I use it. I just want to close it and go, you know? So it's not the easiest bag to get in and out of if you do want to close it properly every time. For that reason, often I don't close it completely properly because it is a little bit of a faff, but that is definitely, I'd say, the biggest issue with this bag for me. I don't mind it because I do love the look of it so much. I do think it's adorable, but if you're someone who really prioritizes easy access in and out, I do think that you might have issues with this bag. Next up is my Saint Laurent Loulou puffer, and I love this bag so much. I just want to hug it every time I have it out because it's just the most gorgeous leather. The negative aspects of this bag, so the kind of biggest functional issue I would say is that because of the slightly more unique fold over shape, it isn't that easy to find your items. And I don't know why this is the case versus, you know, a large tote bag, but I do find it weirdly difficult to find my belongings inside. And it's more of an issue with the black one as well because it is just kind of a big black dark hole. Like, as you can see, it's just like, it just looks dark, and that's true in real life as well. That's not just kind of trickery of the lighting and the camera, and it's just difficult to find things. Like, I am constantly rooting around trying to find my items. There is a pocket on the back, but to be honest, I don't really use it that much. It's not the biggest and easiest to access pocket, and there's just no kind of dividing space. It is a large bag, but because of the opening as well, it's not the easiest to access. I feel like Mary Poppins every time I try and go in there, and it's just easy to lose things. So I don't know if that's just me, it could be just a weird quirk the way I use and wear my bags, but that is something I found. I try not to carry too much stuff in this bag. Even though it's very light and comfortable to wear, I can definitely fit in more items than I do usually carry in it, but I try not to, just because I know I'm going to be there for like 15 minutes trying to find whatever it is I'm looking for. Another potential flaw that you might want to consider is the shape of the bag and the fact that it does curve. I do think this is another one that's going to come down to personal preference. I don't mind it, and I didn't really consider it to be a flaw, but my mum pointed it out and she did think it was a flaw, and she asked if I was going to get it fixed or exchange it because she thought there was something wrong with the bag. So definitely comes down to personal preference. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but look, you can definitely see it there. It curves at the top. I don't know why it doesn't fix itself with time. You know, I've had this bag a couple of years, I've used it a fairly decent amount, and it still does that. So for me, not a big deal. I don't mind it, but definitely something to consider if you don't like the look of it. It doesn't change over time. And last but not least is my Givenchy Antigona in the mock croc. This is in the small size. I do also have the mini version as well in the lighter color, and I absolutely love this bag, but I would definitely say out of all the bags on my favorites list, this one is the least functional and the one that I had the most issues with in terms of just general usability. Like, I don't think it scores many points of being a really functional style. Pretty much the only reason I really like it is because I just think it's beautiful. I love the way it pairs with outfits, and I know that's very superficial of me, but essentially, you know, most reason why we buy luxury bags is because we like the look of them, and that is 100% the case with this bag. I think the functionality could definitely be improved upon, namely, and like the biggest issue is the opening. It's a very, very small opening, and it isn't a particularly small bag, but the opening, even when, and this is me stretching out to as much as I can, that's as far as it goes, like, and that is me properly stretching out. I wouldn't want to do it any more than that. I don't even think I could do it more than that. That's as far as it goes. And if you're just doing it as a natural opening, it's much more like that. Like, you cannot get it very wide open, and because of that, it really does limit what you can put inside and also what you want to put inside, because even if you did manage to maneuver something inside, you're going to want to be able to easily get it out when you're using the bag, and that's just not the case. So the opening is by far the biggest flaw. It is not functional at all. I don't know why they didn't just extend the opening a bit to make it more useful, but they didn't, and that is just one aspect that you absolutely need to know about the Antigona. Very, very frustrating. Because of that, it links into my second point, which is even though it is quite a roomy and large bag, you can't fit much in there because of the issues of accessibility. You know, even if you did manage to get in there, you're gonna struggle to get it in and out really easily. And for that reason, whenever I use this bag, I pretty much fill it to like that full, because I just know I don't have any hope of actually getting my items out easily if I were to fill it full. So the opening really does affect everything from accessibility to actually, you know, capacity and how much you're going to fill the bag up. And then finally, the last niggle is the strap. So I almost always do use it with a strap when I'm using it out and about. There is almost always kind of one point during the day that I do just want to be hands-free, and so I will just pop it on my shoulder. But the fastening isn't actually that secure, so it can very easily become loose. It has happened to me a couple of times, and it took a while for it to actually happen, but once it did, I did notice it, and I did think it was a bit of a design flaw. So you do just kind of fasten it in like so, and you do, it's a bit kind of like connecting the dots. You just have to fiddle with it in place. But I do find that when you're wearing it and when it is moving about, it sometimes can get disconnected and the strap can fall off, which is obviously not what you want when you do have a really expensive bag. So I do think they definitely could have improved upon the fastening of the straps and also definitely the closure of the bag. So that is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I feel like I've been talking for hours, so I'm gonna try and edit this video down so it's not like an hour long, but apologies if it did go on for a while. I clearly just have a lot to say about these bags. I hope you enjoyed it, you found it useful. If you have any questions about these styles or anything else, then feel free to leave me a comment down below. Let me know what are some of your favorite bags and their worst qualities as well. I'm always interested to know this. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.